Hello, everybody. I am here today. I'm back at ya. Today, we're going to have another episode of Parlor Party. And today is something special. I'm calling it Parlor Party Cartoon Screening Room with my very special guest, Mr. Jerry Beck.
Hello, I am so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yay!
I can't wait.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry, I know that people miss you. I miss you. And I know you're very
Well,
busy and you're all over the place.
well,
But
you should explain why people would miss me because we used to do for many years, like 13 years or something, at the Steve Allen Theater. Do you want to explain that?
yes, well, once a month, we hardly ever missed one. For 13 years, we would put on a show, a concert, and opening film segment with great historian of cartoon animation, Mr. Jerry Beck, who
Mm.
would come and start off the show and introduce vintage animated film shorts, sometimes musical animated film shorts that incorporate jazz artists of the day, all from the 1920s and 1930s. Correct?
Yes, I purposely curated it to go to fit with the show. You know, things that usually the early 30s, late 20s. Sometimes once in a while we showed a silent movie occasionally. Usually one or two cartoons and one or two live action, but always a sing along with the bouncing ball.
Yay!
And we used to show them on. I should grab. See, here you go. I should grab. Wait a minute.
The
I'm almost.
visual.
I actually have right next to me some film. This is what we
Oh,
used to show, 16 millimeter
you
on a
did.
movie projector. It would make noise, and more people would be looking at the projector going, what is that? No, and then looking at the film. No, people really loved that. And actually, our audience knew what a projector was. And the young people love a
Yeah,
movie
just seeing the
projector. Such a
trailer,
cool.
the film sprockets and the countdowns and all of
Yeah,
that.
and then
Sure.
occasionally the film would not run well and sound horribly and or be out of focus or something like that. But
But
we got
it
through.
was a special experience.
That's right. It's a one of a kind special experience just for that audience. And no, it was great. It was great to have. It's always great to have an audience that appreciates the material that you're showing. And I had so many people come up to me afterward, wondering where they can get this and get that. And most of these films were really rare. And so, as you know, I would, for the good of the audience that was begging me, I actually committed some of them to DVD so they could purchase
Yes.
a copy of them because there was nowhere else to get some of these things.
Well, hopefully today will be the first of many, and maybe we'll offer a little something. Maybe I don't know. We're just starting something here.
Yes, we're starting something here. Don't blame us.
So it's a cartoon screening room, your casa and my casa, because everything is virtual. I know that you're teaching a lot, and so you've been doing the virtual teaching thing.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I teach at Cal Arts, and I've been teaching over the summer. I was teaching at UCLA and several of the schools around LA. But with remote teaching, I've now found that I can teach anywhere, and I've gotten some offers. And I'm teaching in Tennessee, of all things, and all over. So it's I got it's worked out for me. I know this has been a hardship for a lot of people, but it's
oh, I'm so glad.
wonderful, and I just love spreading the word. It's the gospel. I just like talking about classic animation is my main thing. And but the thing is, one thing I tell the students is that if you really want to appreciate these old cartoons, and they do appreciate them, and we're living in a world now where there's this video game called Cuphead, which is like in the style of an old 1930s Fleischer Iwerks cartoon. If you really want to appreciate the old cartoons, learn as much about the culture from the period that you can. The music, because once you know the music, then you suddenly know these tunes that are in the backdrop. If you don't know it, these cartoons are delightful no matter what. But once you realize they're playing pop tunes from that era, it enhances your enjoyment of the film. And the people of that day knew those tunes, and they got the joke, because sometimes the tune would be reflective of what was going on the screen.
Yes.
And it just makes it better. And plus, the more you know about, again, in general, pop culture, even world events of the time when these films were made, uh, the funnier they are, the more interesting they are, the more
Or
you'll actually
layers.
go back in time and really feel, the experience of these cartoons. Yeah.
Well, I was going to
So,
say
um,
today we're going to focus on early sound synchronized animation. So these are all
mhm.
from the dawn of sound, all between like 29 to 33. And so what I was going to say also is that that for probably a lot of folks, we grew up with maybe Warner Brothers cartoons on the television, and I think it's a flexible thing in that when you're a kid, you watch those things and you're missing most of the jokes. You're missing a lot of the things that your parents and grandparents would have recognized,
Right.
as far as the pop references or the historical references or the songs of the day. But the thing is that they were so much fun. They resonated. You saw them on a certain level, and then they stay with you. And then as it goes, you have more layers to unfurl. And that's really part of the fun of all of it, is that you don't have to be an expert from the get-go. You can just fall in love with these things, and then they'll lead you places. And that is such a treasure, because there are so many wonderful layers to these things. And so, for instance, for today, you kindly sent ahead some wonderful films for me to take a look at. And I just went down little rabbit holes, looking up some of the people that were in charge of the music at the time to see where they came from and what their background was. And it all interconnects with vaudeville and jazz bands of the day. And it's just fascinating. So, wow. It's a wonderful can of worms. Animated worms.
Yes. Absolutely. Or animated bed bugs, should I say.
For instance. So, for instance, that's a good segue to introduce our first film of the day. Now, would you like to introduce it by name, etc.?
Well, it's you know me, I can give you the name, but the etc. will go on for a few hours. But no, well,
We
the
can talk
first
about it
is,
afterwards too, but yes.
oh, okay. Well, we're looking at a lot of cartoons from the more obscure studios, so to speak. This is from the Columbia Pictures Library. The Columbia really never had any big cartoon stars, like Warner Brothers had Porky Pig and Disney had Mickey Mouse and others. But Columbia's kind of big star was this little boy character named Scrappy, and they really tried to push Scrappy. In fact, they actually made Scrappy cartoons for like 10 years, and still, nobody today remembers the character. But in fact, I have right here, just for fun, I happen to have an old Big Little book, which is one of the many products they made with the character. These are these little books they sold for like a dime or a quarter, and they
Oh,
would have little, each page would have a picture,
oh.
and or maybe every other page, and the back cover has Oopie, his little brother, who you'll see in this cartoon. We're going to see a cartoon called The Flophouse, which is a perfect example of a Depression era cartoon. I believe it's from, is it from 33?
30, I think it was 32.
32, which is, yes, from 32. And Richard Humer was the animator behind this. Before the Scrappy series, he was Max Fleischer's main animator on the Coco the Clown silent cartoons. And after this series, he went over to Disney and he became one of the main writers. He wrote Dumbo. I mean, this guy was a major talent.
And Humor was his real name.
That's right, it was.
It just sort of
And
spelled like humor, but with a French spelling or something.
I believe it's Huemer, but I've seen it misspelled and spelled different ways on different cartoons. But I think that what I just said was the main spelling. And his stuff's very appealing, very what I call round and cute, and everybody was doing Mickey Mouse like characters in this early sound period because Mickey was the big star. Every little character, and I think some of the other cartoons we're going to look at today have similar with the pie cut eyes, where they have a little pie cut in the eyes. And this one, like I said, was very of the Depression era. It takes place in a flop house, which was for people who have no money.
Right, it's like a
And
cheery flop house.
and not only that, this is pre-code, so this flop house has some bed bugs in the flop in the beds there, as you will see. Very strange, very unusual, very pre-code, but very entertaining in my opinion.
Yeah, it reminded me of Charlie Chaplin's The Kid,
Oh
which I
yeah,
think was it was like a decade earlier, but
yeah,
there were famous scenes in this with the gas lighting and just this sad flop house situation, or is you know.
yeah. They weren't afraid to take from the best and to borrow things. You got to remember, this was the world before the internet, before YouTube, before cable cartoon channels, VHS, DVD. I mean, there was no way to see cartoons or even films. I mean, I guess Charlie Chaplin would be an exception because he was so big they would revive and reissue and keep around his films. But really, no other films were. That's why everything was new. There was hardly any re-releases even in the early 30s. Early 30s, that was the beginning of sound, so there was nothing to re-release. They everything had to be brand new, and using over ideas from silent cartoons or silent live action was a commonplace actually.
And so this one is 1932, so the sound has been around for just a few years, and it's synchronized, but there really is no dialogue. I think it's all music and sound effects.
Yeah, I mean, except for the little boy running around going bugs, 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 bugs. Uh,
Oh, well, without further ado,
yeah,
on that note, bugs, 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 Flophouse, here we go.
Isn't that a great cartoon?
Yay! Thank you, Jerry. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
They just don't make them like that anymore.
No, they definitely do not.
I wonder, see, it was so cheery. I guess it wouldn't scare children.
Well, it was the depression, and when you went to the movies, if they were aware, everyone was aware. You went to the movies to escape reality. You're into those fantastic movie palaces. They didn't have multiplex theaters then. All the movie theaters were big in some ways, and they all were ornate. It was a wonderful thing to go to. It was a theater, and the movies were there to take you away in a different thing. So yes, they would remind you that they were still in the real world, or they reflected the real world, but they also made fun of the real world. And what's great about these early cartoons we were talking earlier about is the music. That this was also new. Movies before 1933 didn't have scores. If you've seen, and I know you have, many of the movies, the early talkies from 1928, 29, 30, 31, 32, there's dialogue, and there might be, if you get in a car and it backfires, you'll hear that, or if there's a gunshot, but there's no score. And there might be music in a musical, but there's no score. And because the thinking, I think, was, well, we know what real life sound is. In real life, there is no background music. So the thinking was that in the movies, when you had sound, you'd be experiencing real life. Now, the thing that worked against that or didn't follow that was Disney right away with Steamboat Willie and the earliest Disney cartoons. And then all early sound cartoons are wall-to-wall music. And that's mainly because Disney did that, and because it was, you know, it was, anyway, it was just fantasy. Nobody knew when sound came in. Think about this for a second. When sound came in, we all knew they were just getting used to movies and real life people and live action. And we all know what live action sounds like. We can just walk outside the movie theater and we know what the real world sounds like. But what does a cartoon sound like? Nobody even thought about this. It's like there's no such thing as a moving cartoon. What does that world sound like? Well, Disney defined that as being wall-to-wall music. Disney defined what does a character sound like. You know, he did the voice of Mickey Mouse. And
Let's
the
say
idea,
this. Let's say
yes,
this. Because the silent movies were actually never silent because you always had an accompanist in the theater who was maybe improvising or adding his own themes, or maybe there were fake books for the accompanist. There were orchestras in some case accompanying. Maybe it was one player on a Wurlitzer with all the bells and whistles, and the
mm-hmm.
photo players that had pulleys and gag sounds. And I think that those probably did influence the cartoon folks, you know, in the early days where they were merging some of those sounds. I think that they were probably, they would have had some of those gag sounds from the silent movie days
Well,
uh,
I
on the brain,
agree.
and then they ran with it in a zillion, you know, wild ways.
I agree. In fact, that is, it totally explains when, again, I put a lot of credit to Disney because Disney made the first synchronized sound cartoon. He really defined what that would sound like. But to go along with what you just said, Disney didn't know, wasn't a musician. He didn't know what to do. And what he did was he called for Carl Stalling, who was the theater organist and conductor at the Newman Theater in Kansas City, where he came from.
Love
He
that. I
had
love
him,
knowing that.
and he came out. He brought him out to California, and so they had Stalling do the music for the films, and of course he was doing it a la what he was doing when he scored, you know, the silent movies, and he had all those great tunes in his head, all of the great popular tunes and chase music and this and that. He was the perfect guy.
Mhm.
Quick thing about Carl Stalling, as you may know, he's also the person who suggested to Walt Disney about a second series of cartoons, which were the Silly Symphonies, the cartoons that were based around music, which you could also realize is, you know, where Fantasia comes from. Carl Stalling himself went off from Disney in subsequent years. He worked with Iwerks, and then he landed at Warner Brothers, and he became the Warner Brothers musical director from 1936 till he retired in 1957. And the sound of Warner Brothers cartoons, which for all of us is that ubiquitous cartoon music, that's
Mm.
Carl Stalling.
The split second timing,
Mhm.
incredible, like symphonic, wild, precise, ugh,
Mhm.
extravaganzas. That's great. Well, I do find it really interesting. Like our first cartoon, Flophouse, the music was done by a fellow named Joe Donat, who was a published songwriter of the day. I think that you mentioned that you had a very rare image of piece of sheet music by him that was that for the Crazy Cat series by the same
Yes.
company?
Columbia did both Scrappy Cartoons, and their other star was Crazy Cat, which had been a famous George Harriman comic strip since the teens. And in the teens, the very first animation studio that Hearst Syndicate set up to make animated cartoons, this is right in the wake of Gertie the Dinosaur, um,
Which
was
was Windsor McKay,
Winsor McKay, who was one of the great cartoonists. And Hearst
newspaper cartoonist.
Hearst, right, newspaper cartoonist, right, and Hearst, who had all the great newspapers, figured, well, wait a minute, if this guy McKay is getting all this publicity for, you know, his comic strip, why don't I set up a studio and get publicity for my comic strips and get people, lead people to my newspapers? So he set up an animation studio where he did strips that are now forgotten, but things like the Katzenjammer Kids,
Oh, what do
Jerry,
you mean not forgotten?
oh, not for Jerry on the Job. I don't know about how much people know that one.
Now, what I'm not familiar with though is the earliest animations of Katzenjammer. I
Yes.
didn't even know that had happened.
Oh, yes.
Ooh,
Yes.
oh
Yes.
my
And
gosh.
Yeah, and there. But the thing is, the earliest. We're really going down the rabbit hole here. But the earliest cartoons from this studio were literally slightly animated comic strips, meaning they moved, but when they talked, they didn't have intertitles. They had comic strip balloons, and they were literally animated, comic strips. They weren't as elaborate as Winsor McCay. They had to get them out quickly. They wanted one a week. They really thought of them as comic strips. They wanted them like Sunday comics to happen very quickly. Well, one of those was Crazy Cat, but George Herman and the artists who did these comic strips and were famous, they were famous stars in their own right for doing their comic strips. They didn't have time to animate, like Winsor McCay did. Winsor McCay, he decided he wanted to do this. But so other people, animators, that suddenly a profession started where other cartoonists would make the comic strips come to life by making them move. Crazy Cat continued as a very popular cartoon all throughout the 20s into the 1930s. And by the 1930s, Columbia Picture Studios was doing these Crazy Cat cartoons. But starting in the late 20s, early 30s, Mickey Mouse was so popular, every studio literally wanted their lead character to look like Mickey Mouse. It was so popular. So the early Crazy Cat cartoons, actually, he doesn't look like Crazy Cat at all. He looks like Mickey Mouse,
He gets gloves and shoes.
Yeah, it's the whole bit. And he's got the pie-cut eyes and the whole thing. And the sheet music I have, and I can't show it to you, unfortunately, for a variety of reasons. But it's very rare. So if anybody actually has the sheet music for the Cat's Meow, which is the theme music from the Crazy Cat cartoons, I know it exists.
What year would that have been? That sheet?
Oh, it would have been I'm going to say 30, 31, 32, in that universe. And Joe Donat and Jimmy Bronis wrote the music. And but the thing is, most of the musicians for the studios doing cartoons were band leaders or songwriters.
Which is a great segue to our next cartoon.
Okay, great.
Okay, all right. Here goes. Now, our next cartoon is going to be something called Croon Crazy from 1933. Van Buren is the company.
Yeah.
It was originally a sound synchronized on disc. And the composer, tell me if I'm right or wrong, composer or the musical directors on this were Gene Rodemich.
Yes.
Who was a band leader, a recorded hot jazz band leader right around this time. And like, for instance, I love Wolverine Blues was one of his recordings he did in 23. And his partner on this was a fellow named Winston Sharples, who I looked up, and he had started on the vaudeville stage as a pianist. He played with the Vincent Lopez Orchestra in the 30s, which I went looking this. I've got a photograph of that orchestra with everybody had signed on it, so I went looking for that. And anyway, apparently Van Buren bought some of the Mutual Chaplin films, which Sharples and Rodemich did the music for those at a certain point. So they were early silents, and then in the 30s, with sound, they put the music on those. And I know Chaplin also, when you talk about scoring, he did make his own scores for some of his bigger production films. He wrote his own. He covered that because he was a Renaissance man. So how about it? We'll show this, and then we'll come back, and you can tell me more about it. Okay? Here's Croon Crazy from 1933. Here goes.
Ladies and gentlemen of the radio audience, the McHangnail Cuticle Company presents Cubby Bear.
I can croon
And his radio review, starring Saul Reitman, Kitty Schmidt, and Cal Cholson.
Croons for you. I can spoon knee the moon, but I'd rather spoon with you. Won't you stay?
Reitman sends a telegram, says he can't appear, and Kitty Schmidt is mountain climbing. She will not be here. Jolson broke his kneecap, he can't sing a note. And I got laryngitis, so I guess you're the goat. But the show must go on.
And I'd rather croon to you.
Ladies and gentlemen, when you hear the musical note, it will be exactly 12 o'clock.
Ladies and gentlemen, Saul Reitman.
The moon went over the mountain. The moon went
Hello, everybody.
The moon went over the mountain to see what he could see. I used to be her boy, her pride and joy, my mammy. I'm gonna walk the track till I get back to mammy.
I'm the gal they're talking about. And here's the reason for it all. I haven't got an awful lot, but what I've got a lot of. Come up and see me sometime.
This program is coming to you through the courtesy of the McCann Nail Cuticle Company. See your dentist twice a year, and remember, 20 words, no more, no less.
I can croon to the moon, boo, 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 boo. I can spoon me the moon. Won't you stay, don't go away. Go, 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 go. As I croon to the moon. but I'd rather croon to you.
Thank you, Jerry.
Oh, thank you.
Crazy. Talk about the rabbit hole on that one. For pop culture, it's just full of references of many of the popular people that everybody knew at the time. Saul Reitman, everybody would have recognized it as Paul Whiteman, the band leader. Hal Jolson was, of course, Al Jolson. I thought it was pretty cute. Kitty Schmidt, which they made some money. They made some jokes about the moon coming over the mountain because she was a big lady and that was her big song. And her name in the cartoon was Kitty Schmidt instead of Kate Smith. And Mae West, I forget if they gave her a funny name. Gandhi was in there in India. So that was just a whirlwind. And then for all the people under a certain age, they could just try to figure out the secret code of everybody that's in there.
Right. That's what's great about these cartoons, like we said already, the pop culture of the era, doing caricatures of celebrities or just making fun of them. I mean, these were things everybody knew and everyone would get a laugh at. I think even at the beginning of it, he's at the radio station and I think it's like WRKO or something like that, or RKO Radio, which is their distributor. RKO Radio Pictures distributed these Van Buren cartoons. In a nutshell, Van Buren was another studio that existed in New York City. They literally were across the street from the Fleischer studio in Times Square. And they were, in the 1920s, the super popular Aesop's Fables studio. Aesop's Fables were the big cartoon of the 1920s, along with Coco and Felix the Cat. The Aesop's Fables were huge. The Van Buren cartoons.
I was curious. Can I ask about the Aesop's Fables? Were the cartoons based around the fables?
Well, maybe some of the early ones were, but no, they were just funny cartoons. Very funny, great artwork as well. And but they had a gimmick where it'd be just a crazy nonsensical situation. It could even be as simple as a farmer shooting all of his mice or something on his farm, but at the end it would end with this Aesop said 3,000 years ago, and it would have a funny line, and that would be like the punchline of the cartoon. For whatever reason, that worked. And the thing is the ones that still exist, because as you know, a lot of the 1920s, every film, anything nitrate, a lot of this stuff is lost. But luckily, a lot of them are still around, enough for us to get a very good idea of what the series was like. And they really are top-notch cartoons. By the 20s, Disney was the leader in animation in terms of the quality of animation. The Van Buren studio remained in this 1920s mindset. That's not a bad thing, but Disney was just forging ahead and making the cartoons more beautiful and more character animation and this and that. And the Van Buren cartoons kind of became old hat. They were competing with their version of Mickey Mouse, which was Cubby Bear, as we see in this cartoon. The Van Buren studio unfortunately came to an end around 1936 with two things. One, Mr. Van Buren that ran the studio, decided to retire, and then shortly after doing that, he closed his studio and then passed away practically within succession. At the same time, RKO scored getting Disney's cartoons. Disney was distributing them through Columbia Pictures, United Artists, all through the early 30s. He was an independent studio. He was seeking new distribution. He was looking for a big distributor who might be interested in taking on his crazy pet project, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which people thought was a crazy idea before they saw it. They thought the idea of an animated feature was nutty because they kept thinking it would be 90 minutes that would look like Croon Crazy. Nothing wrong with that. We'd love it, but would that work? No, but Disney had, a more sophisticated idea for an animated feature. Anyway, so RKO ended up with Disney's movies, and that ended the Van Buren. And they also I
have a question for you.
Okay.
The connection between Aesop's Fables, which is a series, or it wasn't a company name, because I came across something that said that the the great showman behind the vaudeville circuit, B.F. Keith,
Yeah.
the Albie Keith circuit and all of that, was behind that. Now, I don't know if he just put up the money, but so it was an interesting connection that the vaudeville entrepreneur started that company or that series or something like that, which I guess became Van Buren. I was curious.
You know, I don't exactly know as far as the 20s are concerned. I know that when sound came in, Pathé and RKO were the distributors of the Aesop's Fables series, which continued into the 1930s. The Aesop Sound Fables, they called them then.
Oh, there you go.
But RKO, of course, is connected to the Keith, the RKO Keith theaters, and they're all connected. So I'm sorry I don't have the absolute answer to that, but clearly there's a connection.
Well, I didn't make that connection that the RKO was the K was Keith. So
Right.
vaudeville and then more enterprises into radio.
Right.
There was a
Right.
vaudeville circuit and radio and then this kind of animation production. Maybe they did films. I don't even know.
Well, the Aesop's Fables were so big that they were the kind of thing that there was no doubt they were going to continue into the sound era. There was no reason to stop them. They were too famous. That said, like the hurricane hitting land, the minute the inertia of the fame of Aesop's Fables made it into the sound era. Unfortunately, the cartoons were overshadowed by Disney and other studios and famous named characters. It wasn't a series. The series wasn't popular enough to outweigh characters like Betty Boop and Popeye and Mickey Mouse and things like that. So characters became the thing, and that's why the Van Buren Studios started to try to develop new characters like Cubby Bear, like the Screen Gems studio, the Columbia studio. They did not come up with a long-lasting, famous name character that we know today. Molly Moo Cow was their most famous character. Nobody remembers that one.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
I did love Felix the Cat. Those, because I know they made lots and lots of silence of Felix the Cat, and then
Felix the Cat, you're right. Felix the Cat.
Yeah.
I don't know why Felix the Cat did not continue in a strong way into the sound era. Part of it is because it wasn't owned by a major studio, or the studio that was making it was so small. They didn't change their ways. Felix the Cat made it into the sound era, but if you see the ones from 1928, 29, 30, 31, they look literally like silent cartoons, and the sound is they just added little sound effects and music.
Yeah.
It didn't,
squeaky.
it's almost like Chaplin, when first Chaplin started doing silent movies in the sound era. It's the same kind of thing. They were doing silent cartoons in the sound era. Van Buren, the studio we've been talking about, made 3 Technicolor Felix the Cat cartoons. They picked up the rights, but just as that was starting, that was like 36. That was the end of the studio. So Felix ended his movie career then. He continued as a comic strip star for decades, and then came back as a television star. You may know the TV cartoons from the 60s, which with radio, I can't even imitate it.
But... a fun blur. Well, all right. I think it might be time
Oh, now, okay.
to go to
Another
our
cartoon?
next cartoon, which
Okay.
is a Terry tune.
Mm-hmm.
Another early sound, perhaps obscurity, lots of fun, called Popcorn from 1931.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
love this.
It takes place in Coney Island.
Love this.
Did
So
we
this
just
one
watch
was very interesting because we were talking about, you said that this particular company, the Terry Tunes, Frank Moser and Paul Terry, correct?
Mhm.
And that they were all about economy. You figure this was 1931, so this is pretty much Deep Depression. They hired a fellow named Phil Scheib to do the music, and he was just churning everything out. They didn't use much pop music or anything. They didn't have access to it. They didn't have the budget for it.
I told you that, but then you told me that in this cartoon they're using an actual license song.
Yes, from 1921, they use this great little tune that people kind of know about. So, and I looked up more about Phil Scheib, and I found that he had been on tour with a famous dance team in vaudeville called Adelaide and Hughes, and that he also was musical director for D.W. Griffith. So before he ended up churning away cheap good stuff for Terry Tunes. So it was a good job.
Did you want me to comment more right now? I will do that.
Oh, tell me a little more before we play it. Sure.
All right. Well, first of all, I have a little. I don't know if you can see this because it's so small, but it's a little Terry Tuners button for people in the Terry Tuner Club. This is
a Terry.
This is actually a reproduction of a. Can you see it?
Yes, he's a little blurry. Fan Club Terry Tunes.
This is the Terry Tuners Music and Fun Club. And this is an actual button that they gave out to people in the day. Okay. Terry Tunes was a studio that started by Paul Terry in 1930, and this is one of the first ones. In fact, the first year of the Terry Tunes, I really suspect they had like 26 releases, one every 2 weeks, churning them out. And I really suspect they had to give a list to the distributor of the titles, and they were like, we don't know what we're going to do. So they literally wrote down 26 foods, because if you look at the first year of release, every cartoon has a food title, and they try to, incorporate that food title into the story somehow. This one takes place in Coney Island, which is interesting because, like the Van Buren studio, like the Fleischer studio, they were located in New York. They were another New York studio. Most animation studios were in New York in the 1920s. It was Disney, again, who went from Kansas City out to California that reversed the trend. But Paul Terry was a pioneer. He started making cartoons in the 1910s, in like 1917. He was the guy who came up with the Aesop's Fables. And he did the Aesop's Fables for Van Buren and ran that studio in the 1920s. He was the reason for their success, but he had a falling out with Mr. Van Buren by the end of the sound era and started his own company, Terry Tunes, and he just would go on from there. His theory was maybe he was a little full of himself, because his theory was that people came because they liked his cartoons because they were the Aesop's Fables, or he was doing them. They're Terry Tunes, Paul Terry. So he had this feeling of it didn't matter what the characters were in it. And it took forever for him to have what I call establishing regular characters. The only one he really had during the 1920s and into the 30s was Farmer Alfalfa. I don't think he's in this one. And but then he eventually came up with some other characters with hit or miss success until he finally hit a gigantic success in the 40s with Mighty Mouse. That's
how about
Paul
that?
Terry. And later on, Heckle and Jekyll and a few others. But that was later. This is the
drawings on this are so delightful.
They are
vague, right? They're not the catchiest characters, but they're really fun.
No, his style. This is actually a good example of why they were popular in the 20s. There's a lot of charm here, and there's nothing wrong with this cartoon. When I was talking about how they were later on into the 30s, into the 40s, they were the lowest of the low in terms of low budgets. And Terry was reluctantly dragged into making the cartoons better with quality, following Disney, which every other studio was happy to do. He was kind of reluctantly had to stay with the times. But here is Terry in his time, when he's part of that period, and it's great.
Yeah, sometimes just seeing these great drawings in black and white, it's enough for me any day.
Let me mention before we watch it, that these prints are very rare. This is a great 35 millimeter transfer. Those are extremely rare. And this is a print from England. It's a British print. I'm only mentioning that because you're going to notice at the beginning it'll say something about Great Britain. But other than that, this is the way people saw it. It was released educational pictures here in the United States.
Fabulous. Okay, here it is. Popcorn, 1931. Here goes.
Ain't we got fun? Not much money. Oh, but honey, ain't we got fun? Every morning we having a bath. What's more for my
haunted house on the inside. Don't miss the haunted house. How do you do?
Oh, I never got to go to Coney Island, but I hope it's just like that. With
It is.
fireworks that look like dancers and wiener dogs.
It's exactly like that.
Oh, I hope so. Well, that was so much fun that, you know what, I cannot resist. And since we did realize that in this particular Cheapy Terry Tunes, they did use a real popular song published in 1921 called Ain't We Got Fun. That's just, I think that it really, the lyrics fit so well our current situation in a certain way that I'm just going to run right around the corner here, right around this curtain, and I'm going to go do it, and I'll come right back. Okay. Every morning, every evening, ain't we got fun? Not much money, oh but honey, ain't we got fun? The rent's unpaid, dear, we haven't a car. But anyway, dear, we'll stay as we are. Even if we owe the grocer, ain't we got fun? Tax collectors getting closer, ain't we got fun? There's nothing surer, the rich get rich and the poor get laid off. In the meantime, in between time, ain't we got fun? Do-do-do-do, ain't we got fun? Not much money, oh but honey, ain't we got fun? The rent's unpaid, dear, we haven't a car. But anyway, dear, we'll stay as we are. Even if we're afraid to go out, still we got fun. 6 months in, dear, we can hold out, ain't we got fun? There's nothing surer, the rich get rich and the poor get children. In the meantime, in between time, ain't we got fun? Do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do, ain't we got fun? Yippee!
Oh, thank goodness.
Oh, thank goodness.
I feel so much better now.
Oh, thank you, Jerry. I love that. I'm having fun.
Thank
Right
you.
here at home. No masks.
Yeah.
Very nice. So back again, everybody. Let's do a little, we're going to show and tell a little keynote. May
Oh.
we?
Let's see.
All right.
It's Keynote Corner.
Here goes with fun goodies and flying high with Terry Tunes. Tell us, what is this?
Well, this goes, of course, perfectly after popcorn. This is a trade advertisement for the very earliest of the Terry Tunes. As you can see, this must be about 31 or so. You can see that some of the ones on the right at the bottom, Raspberries and Club Sandwich, are two of those early ones with the food titles. But it looks like they finally decided to go with titles that reflect the actual film. There's Farmer Alfalfa in the flying automobile at the top there. And this was the beginning of Terry Tunes at this point. As it says here, funny gags, captivating swing of lilting melodies, and perfect synchronization.
Yes. New and improved in 1931, just like that film. Let's go. And
here's another one.
Oh,
Similar trade ad, which mentions Dutch treat and Irish stew, jumping beans, and fried chicken too. Those are some of those early food titles. Educational pictures, the spice of the program. So everything is about food back then.
That's so great. Well, good. Yes, wonderful. Oh, it's so adorable. Look at the beer drinkers and the chickens and fry pans, and I like this guy with his pipe. He's Irishman.
Well, that's it. And he was probably in the cartoon Irish Stew. They would try to make the cartoon about, the title. So, like, it says Dutch treat, and you can see there's one at the top left there. There's some Dutch, cats or whatever they're supposed to be. And you can see all of them actually have some kind of ethnic aspect to it.
Exactly, which is so much like the old entertainment, the vaudeville entertainment was all like that. Now, so this would have been for the film distributors. Simply show them on your bill if you want to fill your till.
Right, exactly. This was the different theaters around the country would get the trade magazines, I call them, and these would, here's something you can buy or order, and we'll send it to you, and you'll get them. That's the only way these were really distributed and sold back then. So I love these ads.
Yeah. So 1931, you figured that the theaters were still being run mom and pop, maybe, or some of them might have been starting to be.
A lot of them were chain theaters that were built by the studios that. Well, actually, it was the theaters that owned the studios. Things like Lowe's Theaters owned MGM, and Paramount, I guess, was the reverse. Probably Paramount existed first, but they bought their own theaters. Warner Brothers had theaters. All the studios had them, but there were so many theaters. Again, how could there be so many? There was way more than there are today because nobody had television and they weren't multiplexes. So there were many, many theaters in every town. The neighborhood theater was a staple, a thing in every little town that would have a theater or two. Every neighborhood. Now
and
we're
for
looking
this
at
one, what would this be? A lobby card or an advertisement?
No.
Or scratch the first thing that we saw?
That's a great question. This would have been the original titles on the film for Flophouse or any of the scrappy cartoons from this period. There's Dick Humer's name. I mentioned unusual spelling there. Charles Mintz was the producer. Joe Donat getting his musical credit. And there it says distributed by Columbia Pictures. This is the original title. They would take these off of, a lot of these cartoons were sold to TV in the 50s and they replaced the titles, which, makes me cry. But luckily people like me go to a lot of trouble to try to restore the original titles on these films, and we're still working on it.
And some of these things were like bought and sold to different companies, maybe when they put sound on some of the older ones or whatever, and so they just would chop off the original titles. And
part of the reason they chopped off the titles without getting too far into the rabbit hole was because when television came in, the movie studios, kind of in unison with the theater people, said, we don't like television. Television was the enemy, because if you had television in your home, it would keep you away from going to the movie theater. And so the studios and the movie theaters were anti-TV until somewhere in the late 50s. And so the only way that Columbia Pictures could actually make a buck and this goes for every other studio, on their old library of old movies, features, shorts, and cartoons, was they couldn't sell them to TV because the theater owners would raise a stink and say, why are you showing your old films on TV? So they would sell them to a middleman, another company. They would strip off the opening titles and the Paramount logos and things like that and put on their own titles. And that way the theater owners would be appeased, as if, the other thing.
Castle Films, was that one of those companies that just distributed or something?
Castle Films was really a home movie. There were two ways to see movies like that, these old cartoons. One was on television with a television distributor's credit on it. And the other way was home movies, people having their own home movie projectors, 16 millimeter or 8 millimeter, and you could buy movies and cartoons at a department store. And Castle Films was one of those distributors, and they, of course, put their own titles.
And when would that have been a popular thing to do? A little craze to have.
Oh, Castle, I think this started in the 30s, but it was kind of a high-end hobby, considering it was the Depression. So, but I think home movie sales and the hobby itself took off big time in the 1940s and 50s. When I was a kid in the 60s, I had an 8 millimeter projector. I bought movies at Macy's in the camera department, things like that. I know, I want to go back. I know. Now here's Cubby Bear in an Aesop's Fable. This is everything I said before. At the very bottom right, lower right, it says RKO Radio Pictures, a Van Buren production. It's an Aesop's Fable series featuring their star Mickey Mouse ripoff character, Cubby Bear.
Got the gloves, got the shoes.
Exactly. And the girlfriend. And a monkey and a fez. I don't know what that's about, but I'm sure it's kosher.
Oh, I brought this out because this is the Vincent Lopez Orchestra.
Wow.
And so who was it that I was saying had played with
Winston
Lopez?
Sharples, I think.
Winston Sharples, right. You know what? I looked, because I've treasured this photograph, and I thought, I can't wait to see what Winston Sharples looked like then. And I couldn't find him for the life of me. I got out my magnifying glass and everything. But they were just an excellent touring dance band in the 30s. And anyway, so Winston Sharples had played with him around this time and had toured with them apparently. And weren't you going to tell us something else about what Winston Sharples and Gene were?
Well, Sharples, after being working on the Van Buren cartoons in the mid-30s, when that studio closed, he became the kind of the assistant orchestrator for Sammy Timberg at Fleischer Studios. And when Sammy Timberg retired from cartoons in the mid-40s, around 44, 45. Winston Sharples basically took over, became the house orchestra for the Paramount, not only the cartoons, which include at that point, the Casper, the Friendly Ghost cartoons, and Little Audrey and things like that. And he continued doing that way into the 1960s. He also did Paramount also had shorts, live action shorts. They were still producing way into the 1950s, and Sharples did the scores for that out of New York. One of the more famous people in Sharples' orchestra for the cartoons and films was Francis Ford Coppola's father, Carmine Coppola. That's right. He was a flutist, and you can hear his flute playing in a Casper the Friendly Ghost cartoon. Have you listened carefully?
Well, if you're wondering about this photograph that I have up
Yes.
here, I pulled this because Phil Scheib had been on vaudeville tour with this team, Adelaide and Hughes. They were a well-known vaudeville dancing team. And so just in the course of looking up a little bit about Phil Scheib, I realized that he had been on the vaudeville circuit. As so many of these people, they just
That's wonderful.
They segued from one thing to another.
I was gonna say, eat your heart out, furries. Great photo.
Exactly. Oh, this is just delectable.
Well, this photo made me think of you, because that's you on the left. That's me on the other side.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Excited. We're both very excited.
This is from It's from one of the Merry Melodies, Red-Headed Baby from actually the early 30s, one of the ones done by the Harman and Ising studio for Leon Schlesinger and for Warner Brothers. And this was their series of kind of a ripoff of Silly Symphonies, which was, of course, called Merry Melodies, and loaded with music. And they were lucky enough to use songs. In fact, they were ordered to use songs that were owned by Warner Brothers, because Warner's really wanted to plug, all their tunes and have the sheet music be sold. And so when not only would you see, a song like Red-Headed Baby, I'm sorry, I don't remember which film it's from, Gold Diggers, but it's from one of the films. And then you'd also see this cartoon later on. So that way you keep the tune in your head.
And when you figure Merry Melodies, that was the same Warner Brothers theme that they used all the way into the modern times with Porky Pig.
Well, Merry Melodies was the series that continued on. It still continues to this day. It's the series that introduced Bugs Bunny and
here it's Merry Melodies, singular.
Well, Merry Melodies is, that's right, it's a Merry Melody cartoon. Yes, they did that. They never said that. I don't think it says that on screen, and I don't think it says it on any of the posters, but they would refer to a singular one as Merry Melody. That's right.
And I love that the theme song is The Merry-Go-Round Broke Down, which was...
Merry-Go-Round Broke Down, yeah. And these are Vitaphone shorts, these early ones, of course.
Yes, isn't that great? So synchronized disc.
That's right.
Oh, I pulled this one because it's from, it was a gift from a friend, and this is Clarence Ducky Nash, who did the voice for Donald Duck, along with Ukulele Ike, Cliff Edwards.
Yeah. And I found out what this is from since I spoke to you last. This is from a strange 1947 radio show for ABC that they both did in character for Disney. And it's a friend of mine's going to get me a copy of it, but it's called something like Donald Duck 1960. And that's the name of it. And it's supposed to be a look at the future from 1947. That's what it is, because I had to trace what was this unusual photo.
Wow.
And I love it. It's a very rare photograph you have here. So.
Incredible. I love looking up Ducky Nash. He was the Birdman of Ador Farms or something like that.
Yes, birds were his specialty. He did bird sound effects in Snow White, but it's that unique voice, which I think was a goat. On radio, he did this weird goat voice, which we know today as Donald Duck's voice.
Wow.
And Donald was built around that voice, of all things. And of course became Disney's most popular character in the late 1930s and into the 1940s and 50s. Really, literally was his most popular character. And that's why he appears in the Three Caballeros and all sorts of things beyond short subjects.
So, so eclipsing Mickey Mouse, would you say?
Yes. Mickey, not to go down the rabbit hole too far, get your bell out. No, but the thing is that Mickey was so popular in the early 30s, but he was originally animated as a real scallywag. He was a real bad boy. And Disney got early complaint letters from parents saying, "Oh, I love your cartoons, but and I want my kids love them too, but can you make them be nice?" And so they had to clean up Mickey Mouse. And then they hit upon the idea when they finally did a cartoon that contained Donald, which was one of the Silly Symphonies. They realized, hey, we can get away with all that bad boy stuff that we wanted to do with Mickey with this character. And they did that. And so when you see those early ones where it's Mickey and Donald and Goofy, Donald's doing all the bad stuff. He's pretty much cursing, even though you really can't tell what he's saying, And so he's doing all the stuff Mickey Mouse can't do, and thus became more popular than Mickey.
And of course, Bugs Bunny was no nice fellow. He was.
Bugs Bunny was we're getting too far down, but in one sentence, Bugs Bunny was another story, because it's the turn of the decade, the 1940s, the war, and Bugs represented a new feeling that Americans had about themselves, and especially confronting the rest of the world, in the war situation, which was, we're not going to take that. We're little tough guy. That's what Bugs Bunny was.
All right. Well, I know how could we, I mean, we can't cover everything, but of course, we cannot avoid the Fleischers.
Right.
And I wanted just an interesting segue is that one of my favorite kind of early entertainers of vaudeville that segued into music making in cartoons were Sammy and Herman Timberg, who I believe that Sammy wrote the music for Betty Boop.
Yes.
And, I've been finding things of theirs. Oh, here's speaking of Betty Boop. Cool.
Oh, yes. Well, the Fleischer Studio, Betty Boop and Popeye. Popeye was, both these characters were gigantic. And considering Disney was the leader of animation, Fleischer was his biggest rival because he had these great stars and great cartoons. And of
Yes.
course, great music. And
The hottest because of folks like these guys.
I know. And it's so sad that Sammy Timberg and Herman Timberg are, in my mind, so forgotten today by like almost everybody. I mean, they were so big and they're so talented, and it's almost a crime that they're not more well known.
Look at this was from a movie that you had. That I wonder if this film is still around.
A short with Herman Timberg from MGM of all things.
Big
I mean, what's interesting to me is this is actually an extra a bonus here is that it says directed by Nick Grindy or Grind, but I found an article, an old Esquire magazine article by Nick Grind, all about cartoons of the 1930s. Apparently, he was a film director, but he was really into animation, and he wrote a really good article about cartoons when people weren't writing about it. Like there were no historians or anything yet. So I find that interesting as well.
Oh, so great. And also I found that piece of film of something that Herman and Sammy wrote for the Marx Brothers
Right.
to do in their first Broadway show, I'll Say She Is, which, wow, is just so neat. Woo!
There you go.
And of course, talking about Betty Boop and the Fleischers, here is the lady they sort of modeled Betty after, who is Helen Kane.
I know she doesn't look quite as Helen Kane-ish as we all know. She has the spit curls, and I guess she's got the mouth there.
The 3/4 look there,
Yeah. What year would you say this is? I guess. Well, obviously it's from 1929 or so, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
I think that's correct. In fact, I'm gonna sing the song. I can't help myself. More Betty Boop.
Well, this contains two puzzles, but let me tell you, and it contains 3 stars. It has Betty Boop. Coco was the big star of the Fleischers of the 1920s, but he's relegated to supporting roles in the when sound came in, and of course they had to introduce a Mickey Mouse-like character, and that was Bimbo, of all names, and and it reflects the whole New York City attitude of the Fleischer Studios, and they had a really great sense of humor. In
So good.
these cartoons at that time.
So sophisticated. And of course, this has got a country setting with the horse with his horseshoes coming off.
That's Fleischer's just adding an extra gag to this. Let's have the shoe halfway off. Let's throw a little ladybug in there as well. The whole thing is that's very much the Fleischers, just always topping themselves and adding something extra.
So good.
Yeah.
And then here's Mae Questel.
There's May striking a Boop-like pose, apparently going to be on radio. But I have nothing but super admiration for her. She was amazing and deserves any credit that she can get. I don't even know her getting credit. But she was a really prolific voice actress, particularly for the Fleischer Studio, doing Olive Oil for the Popeye cartoons. Usually a lot of little kids and any women characters.
Oh,
And
I didn't know that.
She did this throughout the 30s, and then continued with Paramount doing Olive Oil and Little Audrey for the Paramount cartoons into the 1950s and 60s, and many things beyond that. She's in so many TV commercials and children's records, and of course she had an on-screen life where she would be in a couple of movies, especially right into her later days. I mean, she was Aunt Bluebell in the old I forgot what the product was, but it was a paper towel that she hawked in the 1970s. And she's in movies like National Lampoon's Vacation, where she's the grandma. And she plays Woody Allen's mother in New York Stories. And,
so good.
she had a great career. She's also in Funny Girl, one of Fanny Brice's mom's best friends in that film.
Oh, wow.
So if you want to see her on screen.
She probably knew Fanny Brice.
She probably did.
Is adorable.
This looked like the kind of thing that I imagine you, Janet, would be eating some bonbons. When you're sitting back in your parlor eating some this is what you have.
Bonbon.
Yes.
So great. She's kind of a redhead in this one.
Yeah, it's funny that whenever they didn't blacken in her hair for most of the publicity images, and whenever they didn't do that and they would have to reprint something in color, for some unknown reason they gave her orange hair. That even is true in they made one color cartoon with her in the 30s where she plays Cinderella. I don't know if you've seen that one. It's called Poor Cinderella, and she has red hair in that one because it's just because it's color. They'd said, well, give her red hair.
Oh, here's a little Japanese thing. Maybe
yes, we were talking about that. The Japanese, keep in mind this is before World War II. In the 30s, were gigantic fans of Disney and Fleischer. And to them, there was literally no difference. It's two different studios didn't mean anything. So there are comic strips, books, all sorts of things where they combine the two studios. Now, I have a feeling he did this without anybody's permission, but that's just there's so much evidence of it. So it was
the
a thing.
cartoons make it a smaller world, that's for sure. So here we go. I'm going to undo this. Well, how about one more? How about one more little song and one more Betty Boop cartoon for the road? Now that we're fun and satiated with animation fun facts. Thank you to you, Jerry Beck, for spending the late
you're
afternoon.
so welcome. You're so welcome. I wanted to show my shirt off.
Let's see that.
I'm wearing Tex Avery today. You didn't ask.
Yes,
I
here's
have
your
my
statement. Oh,
Tex Avery embroidered shirt, and then I'm wearing my I love to sing a T-shirt underneath. For those of you with Owl Jolson there.
Owl Jolson.
It's all cartoons all the time. If I don't know how much more I'm on, but cartoonresearch.com is my blog. I'd like to plug that, and I'd also like to plug quickly my friend Steve Stanchfield, who does Thunderbean Animation, who puts out a lot of these cartoons on a DVD, and Thunderbean Animation. So I just wanted to plug that.
Wonderful. Well, I'll have in the title card at the end a little bit, so if anybody can write it down and savor it and go down this path for more, and hopefully we'll do this again. So, okay, one more little song. Here it is. I'm going to run it on the other side. Whee!
Okay.
Talk of sweeties, bashful sweeties, I've got one of those. He's handsome as can be, but he worries me. Goes to college, gathers knowledge, gee, what that boy knows. He's up in his Latin and Greek, but in his chic, and he's weak, 'cause when I want some lovin', and I gotta have some lovin', he says, please, stop it, please. He's so unusual. When I want some kissin', and I'm burning up for kissin', he says, no, let me go. He's so unusual. I know lots of boys who would go crazy over me if they only had this fellow's opportunity. Well, I would let him pet me, but the darn fool doesn't let me. He's so unusual. I don't like the moonlight. Let's not park in the dark. He's so ridiculous. When we're in the taxi, he converses with the chauffeur. Why don't he talk to me? He's so different. Others would be tickled pink to boop-a-doopa with me. He don't even know what boop-a-doopa-doopa-doo could be. He thinks love is hokum. Gee, I'd like to choke him. He's so unusual that it drives me wild. You might as well be by yourself when in his company. When we're out together, I'm as lonesome as can be. But still, I'm wild about him, and I just can't live without him. He's so unusual that it drives me. Ba-ba-ba-dum-ba.
I'm assuming you can see me doing this, even if I'm not talking.
Thank you for humoring me. I never do Betty Boop songs, but I couldn't help myself today. I did it.
Only you do them so wonderfully.
I keep the boops to myself.
Please keep your boop to yourself. No, please give us your boop. Give us your boop.
Well, let's just say we'll just take it out with this wonderful Betty Boop cartoon that it just left me with little tears coming down my cheeks when I saw this last. So I want to thank you, Jerry, so much for spending a little late afternoon.
Thank you.
Frolic.
It's so great. It's so great. We had a reunion. We had a Zoom reunion.
I'm hungry for it. I'm hungry for it. So thank you for making fun for me. I so enjoyed it and sharing it with the folks tuning in, and so happy we're here. So thank you again for this last one. Why don't you introduce it?
Well, this is it's in honor of Betty Boop, and actually we're in the year 2020 that we are in now. This is Betty Boop's 90th anniversary. She premiered in 1930. This cartoon, I think, is from 33, we said. And it's precode, which means it's Primo Betty. And of course, this is Betty's birthday. And that's what this cartoon is about.
90. Oh, yeah, she had the era I wanted. So this one I was so excited because they feature this adorable little birthday song that was a famous tune at the time called Baby's Birthday Party Day. And 1930, it was written by Anne Ronell. It was just a fantastic, high-class woman composer of the 30s. And also one of my favorite tunes, Humming to Myself, from 1930 is incorporated in this. The Fleischers did the hottest music of all of the animation studios, if you ask me. Maybe you didn't ask, but...
They did.
All right, any last words about this one?
Well, maybe I'm not going to come out on the other side.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
Okay, all right, here goes. One more, we'll come back. Here goes.
Made of pen and ink, she can win you with a wing.
Yoo-hoo!
Ain't she cute?
Boop, boop, be-doop.
Sweet Betty.
I've got the words, I've got the tune. been rehearsing here in this room, but I've got nobody to hear my song, so I'm humming to myself. There's so much work I have to do. No one to play with, that's why I'm blue. And I have nobody to hear my song, so I'm humming to myself.
I guess it just had to be.
Won't someone listen to me? I'm so alone, and I could cry. Another birthday passing me by, 'cause I've got nobody to hear my song, so I'm humming to myself. Oh my dear! I hope it's a man.
Happy birthday!
Surprise!
I'm so happy.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday!
Thank you.
Congratulations!
Thank you.
We wish you luck!
Happy birthday. Thank you.
This is Bertie's birthday party day. This is Bertie's birthday party day. It's
Bertie's
birthday
party
day. Mine.
It's mine!
Mine.
It's mine! Make up your mind!
Mine.
Mine!
Come here.
What? Oh! Oh! Betty.
Say to you, Georgie.
Roll. Can you imagine Georgie going to let that girl? I never thought it.
Happy birthday, Betty.
Yeah.
It really is her birthday. Oh, that's a wonderful surprise. I didn't know that.
Yes, I didn't know that when I handed you that cartoon. It was a complete fluke, but I did know it was her anniversary. The cartoon I gave you was completely at random. It wasn't selected for that purpose. But
So charming.
yeah, you really can't go wrong with any of the ones from 1930 through 1933, 34. They're all the batting average is insane. It's like 100. They're all good. They all have good things in them.
Wow.
They're all they're bizarre. They're fun. They're complete imagination.
Yes. But it seems so real. That's just like my life. I'm taking in laundry here at the house, toiling away in solitude and crying to myself, and then people can come to the fence and wave.
Right. And the people who come are one's dressed as a clown, one's a hippo,
That's just like my life.
Exactly.
Oh, it was so touching. Anyway, that was just great. Oh, now did you have any last tidbits to share about this?
Well, we wanted to mention, you mentioned Anne Rennell.
Yes, she's just one of those fabulous
But what's one of her most famous songs in cartoons?
Who's afraid of the big bad wolf? I don't know. I couldn't tell you what year she wrote that though.
Well, it would have to be 33. That's when the cartoon came out. I think.
Ah,
Around
so
the same time.
right, and so there they were using this, and this film was 1933,
Yeah.
and there they
Well,
were using an Anne Rennell tune. That big.
Well, that's a coincidence, of course, but
But all the interconnectedness, I guess, of all these talented people.
yeah. I mean, this particular one has everything in it, including Coco and Bimbo. I mean, it's got the whole cast. Fleischer had this weird menagerie of cross-eyed creatures that would come invade your home with birthday cake, and so this is pretty much it.
That's it. Well, so yes, Anne Rennell wrote the beautiful, beautiful song "Willow Weep for Me," and I'd have to look up because I just credit her in my mind with everything suave that wasn't written by Gershwin. So it's just been delectable to run through these great things with you.
Well, I'm glad you like them, and down the road, you can have me back, and I'll bring some more.
Let's do it! Yay! Thank you
Yay.
so much, Jerry Beck. Everybody, look this man up. Follow. Cartoon Research.
CartoonResearch.com.
And you'll get so much more. Yippee! Thank you, everybody. It's been a pilot potty. Thank you. I've got the words, I got the tune. I've been rehearsing under the moon, but I got no one to hear my song, so I'm humming to myself. I got the place, I got the time, I got a lot of love words that rhyme. I got nobody to hear my song, so I'm humming to myself. Hi-de-hey, la-da-da-dee. I guess it just had to be. What-da-do, fiddle-dee-dee. Won't someone listen to me? I've got the words, I've got the tune. I like to croon it under the moon, but I got no one to hear my song, so I'm humming to myself. I've got the words, I got the tune. I've been rehearsing under the moon, but I got no one to hear my song, so I'm humming to myself. I got the place, I got the time, I got a lot of love words that rhyme, but I got no one to hear my song, so I'm humming to myself. Ho-dee-do, la-da-da-dee, I guess it just had to be. La-dee-dee, ho-dee-oh, won't someone listen to me? I've got the words, I got the tune, I like to croon it under the moon, but I got no one to hear my song, so I'm humming to myself.